On stage, there are 5,000 people out there coughing and sneezing and laughing and cheering. Sir Cliff Richard has always been recognized as the clean-cut Peter Pan of pop. For decades, he was the star who stayed clear of controversy, never walked down the aisle, and kept his private life firmly behind closed doors. But after nearly 30 years, the mystery is finally beginning to unravel. It turns out that while he was entertaining millions of fans, he was also quietly managing a completely separate life away from the cameras, one that he kept hidden from even his most devoted followers. So what exactly did he keep secret for almost 3 decades? And why is the full story only emerging now? Join us as we reveal the secrets behind Cliff Richard's extraordinary double life. Long before he became the globally recognized star the world knows today, Sir Cliff Richard began his journey as Harry Roger Webb, born on October 14, 1940 in Lucknow, India. His earliest years were spent in a beautiful but rapidly changing world, where his father Roger held a respectable position with the Indian Railways, and his mother Dorothy looked after the family with care and warmth. They lived comfortably in a place called Maqbara, and young Harry grew up surrounded by his 3 sisters, Joan, Jackie, and Donna. As his profile grew, he was forced to rename his band The Shadows after discovering an American group already held the rights to the Drifters name. But the setback barely slowed him down. He had become the most exciting act in British music. Then, in 1964, something happened that redirected his life entirely. Cliff fully committed to his Christian faith. Initially, he feared he might need to walk away from pop music altogether, unsure whether the world of fame was compatible with genuine religious devotion. He even considered retraining as a teacher. Fortunately, those close to him persuaded him that the two could coexist. In 1966, he stood before a vast crowd alongside the evangelist Billy Graham and made his beliefs publicly known. It was a defining moment that demonstrated a man could hold genuine spiritual convictions while remaining a major entertainment figure, though it surprised a fair number of people. His faith shaped everything that followed. He steered clear of the wild excesses that defined the 1960s and instead channeled his energy into gospel recordings and faith-inspired films. He became synonymous with Christmas music, delivering timeless seasonal hits that continue to fill shops and homes every December. He also came agonizingly close to winning the Eurovision Song Contest twice, most notably in 1968 with Congratulations, a song so popular that many still believe the voting was manipulated against him by outside political forces. Regardless, the track became a worldwide sensation that remains instantly recognizable decades later. Beyond music, Cliff built a parallel career as a film star, appearing in beloved musical productions that captured the spirit of a generation. He became a constant presence on British television, presenting his own programs and becoming one of the most familiar and trusted faces in the country. His decades of dedication earned him virtually every major industry award available. The ultimate recognition arrived in 1995 when Her Majesty the Queen granted him a knighthood, making Sir Cliff Richard the very first rock artist ever to receive such a distinction. He maintained his reputation as a polished, principled gentleman for over 60 years, proving that a young boy who had arrived on British shores from India could rise to become the undisputed Peter Pan of pop and hold that position for a lifetime. But remaining at the top required sacrifices that few could fully appreciate. While his fans were swept away by his romantic ballads, Cliff had privately concluded that his true commitment was to his craft. The stage was where he truly belonged. And however much he valued the company of certain remarkable women, he always understood that his romances would eventually need to yield to his ambitions. Sir Cliff Richard might have spent his career singing about heartbreak and romance, but his own personal life has always been wrapped in mystery. For many years, admirers puzzled over why the Peter Pan of pop never chose to marry. He eventually addressed the question directly, explaining that his career demanded every waking moment. He genuinely believed that his total devotion to performing would have made him a poor husband, telling interviewers that while he had certainly experienced real romantic feelings, the institution of marriage represented too great a commitment for someone so completely consumed by the stage. Yet, despite never saying "I do," there were numerous close calls and hidden romances that very nearly altered his story.
Among the most widely known was his relationship with tennis champion and television personality Sue Barker, which began in the 1980s after a particularly confident opening move. Cliff had spotted Sue celebrating a major victory in Brighton alongside members of the Shadows, and he wasted no time. He tracked down her contact details, called her directly, and invited her to a concert at the Hammersmith Odeon, an evening Sue later described as genuinely enjoyable and the beginning of their romance. Even when Sue was competing in Japan, Cliff made efforts to stay present, sending telegrams of encouragement and spending long hours on the telephone, sharing their mutual love of the sport. They reunited for a tournament in Denmark and spent a memorable summer together during Wimbledon season. But the relentless attention of photographers and journalists began to take a real toll on Sue's patience.
She genuinely enjoyed spending time with Cliff and admired his gracious manner with his admirers, but her family had reservations. Her father in particular was concerned about the 16-year age difference. Sue was 25, while Cliff was 41, and worried about the complications that gap might create over time. The relationship gradually cooled. In a moment Sue found rather hurtful, she claims Cliff had a mutual friend deliver the news that it was over, rather than telling her directly. They briefly reconnected when Cliff reached out to say he missed her, but both eventually acknowledged they were better suited as friends. The story took an uncomfortable turn years later when Cliff began telling journalists that he had seriously considered proposing, but ultimately concluded he did not love her deeply enough. Sue, who had long since married a landscape gardener named Lance Tanker, found these repeated public comments both upsetting and baffling. She wrote in her own memoir that had she known she would still be hearing about a few months of dating 4 decades later, she would never have agreed to that first date. She felt Cliff had significantly overstated what she considered a pleasant but fairly light romance, and she simply wanted him to respect her marriage and stop referencing her in interviews. Sue was not alone in that experience. Back in the 1960s, Cliff had spent a memorable summer in Blackpool, growing close to a talented young dancer named Jackie Irving. He later acknowledged in his own memoirs that they spent a great deal of time together and that she was enormously fun to be around. Jackie was 19. Before Jackie, there had been another meaningful connection. A dancer and singer named Delia Wicks, whom he met in 1960 as his career was accelerating at the London Palladium. Despite genuinely caring for her, he felt unable to balance a serious relationship with the demands of his rising stardom. He communicated the end of things in a letter that left her devastated, choosing the pursuit of legend over the possibility of love. Through all of these years, Cliff remained resolutely single. He admitted to other near misses, including a deep but unrequited admiration for Grease star Olivia Newton-John. He confessed that he and many other men had been thoroughly captivated by her during the 1970s, but her engagement to someone else meant he felt the opportunity had already slipped away. Looking back across these relationships, Cliff seems to recognize a consistent pattern. Music and audience always won. He has said repeatedly that being a serious artist is a full-time occupation that leaves no room for the responsibilities of a family. While love visited him on several occasions, the fear of losing his position at the top of the industry always pulled him back from the threshold of commitment. His long-standing friendship and domestic arrangement with former priest John McKellen, which spanned many years, demonstrated how much he valued a stable and private home life, even if it looked nothing like the conventional celebrity marriage his fans might have imagined. Sir Cliff managed to shield his personal world from the ferocious scrutiny
entirely sheltered from the storms of the outside world. While he had spent decades keeping his private affairs away from the tabloids, a nightmare was quietly forming that no amount of careful management could prevent. A dark chapter that would expose his truest self to the harshest public scrutiny imaginable. While Sir Cliff Richard's life had often seemed like a bright and breezy musical, a deeply troubling cloud descended in 2014 that threatened to dismantle everything he had spent a lifetime building. The crisis began with a deeply shocking allegation that the singer had been involved with a 15-year-old boy at a public event in Sheffield back in 1985. As if that were not enough,
4 additional individuals came forward with claims of sexual offenses spanning the late 1950s through to the 1980s. These serious allegations were referred to the Crown Prosecution Service. Cliff was utterly devastated. He maintained his innocence throughout, and the cases were ultimately dropped entirely due to an absence of sufficient evidence. He was never arrested or charged with any offense, but the damage to his sense of self had already been inflicted. He later shared his perspective in a documentary called The Accused: National Treasures on Trial, opening up about the profound hatred he had felt toward his accuser. He described lying awake at night, feeling crushed by the weight of the situation, unable to comprehend how anyone could direct such accusations at another person. The anger he felt was real and at times overwhelming, and he found himself wondering what he would do if he were ever to encounter the person attempting to destroy his reputation. Things reached a point where Cliff felt he simply could not continue living under that burden. Even years after being fully cleared, he made a deliberate decision never to learn his accuser's name, because he did not want the individual to become real to him. He did not want to carry hatred for a specific person. What he hated was the concept itself, the idea that someone could inflict such damage on an innocent human being, and he chose to move forward without a face or a name attached to that feeling. During this period, Cliff was living in Portugal, and the relentless stress of the investigation began to manifest physically. He developed shingles repeatedly, and painful blisters spread across his forehead, coming dangerously close to his eyes. A doctor warned him that his vision was genuinely at risk. When he asked what could cause such a condition, the doctor told him plainly that it was the extraordinary level of stress he was carrying.
The accusations themselves were painful enough, but the manner in which they were handled added another layer of injury. The police search of his home was broadcast live on national television before anyone had even spoken to him directly. Cliff felt this was a profound invasion of his privacy, and despite his apprehension about taking legal action against a British institution, he decided he had no choice but to sue the BBC. He won that case, establishing clearly that what had been done was wrong. Since then, he has campaigned consistently for changes to the law that would prevent the public naming of individuals accused of crimes before they are formally charged, determined that no one else should endure what he survived. As he finally emerged from that legal ordeal, a far more personal challenge was waiting quietly in the shadows. For years, Sir Cliff had been maintaining his polished public image while carrying a secret that had the potential to end his remarkable run altogether. While the world continued to see him as the eternally youthful, eternally smiling Peter Pan of pop, Sir Cliff was quietly carrying a serious burden. In a revelation that genuinely shocked his followers, the 85-year-old legend appeared on Good Morning Britain to announce that he had been privately battling early-stage prostate cancer. The disclosure was striking. While he had been preparing to delight audiences on his 2024 tour of Australia and New Zealand, he had been quietly processing the frightening news that a routine medical examination required for insurance purposes had uncovered a tumor. Doctors had fortunately detected it before it had any opportunity to spread further through his body. He had kept the struggle entirely to himself, stepping forward now specifically to encourage other men to recognize their own vulnerability and to seek testing without delay. In a deeply moving conversation with former news presenter Dermot Murnaghan, who was himself facing a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, Cliff spoke with remarkable candor.
He is now using his experience to call on the government to establish a national screening program for all men, lending the full weight of his famous name to the cause. Health authorities have expressed some hesitation about mass screening, concerned about the possibility of doing more harm than good in certain cases. But Cliff is not standing alone. He is joined in spirit by King Charles, who recently reached a significant personal milestone in his own cancer journey, sharing the encouraging news that he's able to reduce his treatments in the coming year. It is a remarkable thing to witness. The King of England and the King of Pop standing together to make the same fundamental point. Catching these things early is what saves lives. When asked whether he would join forces with the king on a major charitable campaign for cancer awareness, Cliff did not pause for a moment, saying simply that if the king is listening, he is ready and willing. For the fans who have followed him for decades, there is something bittersweet in learning that he carried such a frightening secret in private.
But seeing him transform that hidden pain into a public mission aimed at saving others gives the revelation a deeper kind of meaning. He concealed his health struggles with the same quiet skill he had applied to his private life for nearly 30 years, proving that even someone who has lived his entire adult life in the spotlight can keep the most profound parts of himself carefully tucked away until the moment he chooses to speak. The mystery of Sir Cliff Richard is at last beginning to unravel, and what is being uncovered is a man who faced both serious illness and devastating false accusations, and who emerged from both with his...
For close to 30 years, Cliff shared his home not with a wife or children of his own, but with his manager, Bill Latham, and Bill's mother, whom he warmly described as a second family. Even Bill's girlfriend lived with them for a period, creating a supportive and grounded domestic environment that allowed Cliff to pour himself entirely into his music, his faith, and his lifelong passion for tennis. Bill once explained that Cliff's choice to remain a bachelor did not leave him lonely. It actually gave him an extraordinary degree of freedom. The freedom to give himself completely to everything and everyone he cared about. That lifestyle, of course, invited whispers. For decades, people speculated and gossiped about whether Sir Cliff might be gay. He has always answered that question firmly and directly with a simple no. As far back as the late 1970s, he called such rumors deeply unfair, pointing out that a man who chooses not to pursue casual relationships is not automatically making a statement about his sexuality. He acknowledged that the judgment was hurtful at times, but he refused to marry simply to silence public speculation. To Cliff, marriage was too sacred a commitment to be used as a tool for managing his image. He believed wholeheartedly that single people should never be made to feel like second-class citizens. He knew his own truth, and so did the people who genuinely knew him. His faith, which had been his anchor through so much, was severely tested in 1999 when his close friend...
While Sir Cliff Richard may have lived a carefully guarded life away from the cameras, the truth now coming into the light reveals something rather moving. His greatest secret was not a scandal. It was the sheer scale of what he was quietly giving to the world when no one was looking. For close to 30 years, Cliff shared his home not with a wife or children of his own, but with his manager, Bill Latham, and Bill's mother, whom he warmly described as a second family. Even Bill's girlfriend lived with them for a period, creating a supportive and grounded domestic environment that allowed Cliff to pour himself entirely into his music, his faith, and his lifelong passion for tennis. Bill once explained that